look at those facts, Vinny, it's not enough that she used the name. In my view, she could have just used the name John A. Smith instead of John Smith and then gave a completely different description. I don't think a John Smith then can come forward and say that Casey Anthony defamed him. So for me, it just doesn't meet the legal threshold.
Justin, do you think so? And you know, here's the thing. The other part of the coin is here. We have to remember what it was like back then when this child first is reported missing. Whoever this Zenaida Gonzalez is public enemy #1 at the time. And this is a Zenaida Gonzalez who is right there in Orlando. And if, in fact, she got the name from the Sawgrass Apartments, do you think that's enough to sustain this defamation lawsuit?
Well, first of all, I don't think she was public enemy #1 because I think everyone always thought that Casey Anthony had done this. But putting that aside, I think this lawsuit fails for a totally different reason, and that's because the statement was made to a police officer. There are certain privileges that you get, and one of them, you get a qualified privilege if you make statements, false statements to police officers. You can still be charged with making a false report, but you may not be able to be sued for defamation. The public, partially because of Ms. Gonzalez speaking so much about it, but also because of the media coverage, and that might not have been the intent of Casey Anthony. However, when you're looking at this from pure defamation standard, defamation against a private person, it's different than defamation against a public figure.
She's
do
private.
Not have to show, right, so you don't have to show intent under Florida law to harm somebody. You just have to show some negligence. I think you have to get that clear because a lot of the people who have been talking about this case have been focusing on whether or not Casey Anthony intended to harm Zenaida Gonzalez. Put that away because she's not a public figure. What you have to show is that there was a false statement about someone, qualified, there's no privilege attached to it, and that it caused some harm. If it's a private person, there just has to be some negligence on the part of the person who made the statement that a reasonable person would not have done this. So if you're looking at it purely from an intent versus negligence, I think this case may survive. If I were the defense lawyer, I would argue that this was a privilege statement because it was made to a police officer. I think the intentional situation fails, and if that's what they're going to argue, I think this case continues on.
I'll tell you what about that privilege part of it. To me, that is bad policy. I mean, if you're going to be able to defame someone to police, that's when it's most dangerous because that can result in perhaps a false arrest and even more harm. So, but if that's what you're telling me,
that's why there's.
Go ahead.
But Vinny, that's why there's criminal charges associated with doing that. And if you remember, Casey Anthony was convicted of making false reports. So she did pay a price ultimately for those, although I know
she
a lot
paid
of
a
people
price, but Zenaida Gonzalez was not righted in the wrong. You follow what I'm saying? Because this is about righting a wrong, and there's a victim. In the criminal case, the victim, you know what they get? Nothing.
That's true, but I think that when you're looking at what's the reason why Zenaida Gonzalez's name got into the media, and I think shown by the defense lawyers here that it wasn't Casey Anthony who put this out in public. She said it to the police, and then because of the media attention of this case, it got out into public. But again, putting all that stuff aside, if the defense lawyers are arguing purely that there was no intent, I think that based on Florida law, this case will continue. If they argue the privilege, I think the case may stop today. It depends on which route they go.
All right, the defamation hearing in the Casey Anthony case will